You can find this podcast and others at Gun Rights Radio Network, gunrightsradio.com. Podcasting freedom.
Hello and welcome to episode 60 of Shooting the Breeze, the formal gun podcast of waltinpa.com. Up for you in this episode, we discuss two schools in Houston canceling NRA classes for students. Joyce Wilson, executive director of the IDPA, joins Ron Larimer on the When the Balloon Goes Up podcast. And finally, we discuss the new IDPA rulebook and the concerns that surround it. Stay tuned. Welcome to what I like to think of as Shooting the Breeze 2.0. New season, sort of. New format, and hopefully, if I have time, a new introduction to the video itself. So, you'll have to forgive me if I'm a little rusty. It's been a little while since I've done one of these. It's actually been a little while since I've done much recording at all. The only thing I've done lately is record updates on this square foot garden that I put out in my side yard, which I've been posting to YouTube. Not really gun stuff, but I guess it sort of falls into that survivalist niche, or that maybe a prepper niche, even though I'm not really going at it that way. It's just kind of a fun family hobby that I'm trying to get my wife and daughter involved in. And the response has been surprisingly good. People are when you run a YouTube channel that surrounds guns and booze and firearms primarily, when this gardening topic comes out of left field, I was really surprised to see how well received it was. So I've been kind of doing updates on there. It's very unlikely that you'll see any updates on the podcast itself, and I'm not quite sure why I'm talking about it now. Just kind of one of those fleeting thoughts that get sucked into the video recording. Real quick, before we get started with the news and the meat and potatoes of the podcast, I want to talk a little bit about what's been going on and what's coming up lately. So, we already discussed the format change of the podcast, and next episode we'll be doing a shooter profile. The shooters that we will be profiling in the next episode is Kerry Woods, Sam Woods, and Jake Degenshine, all from the Angry Pig shooting team. They are primarily IDPA shooters, and the really interesting thing about the upcoming episode is that we will be recording this at a sanctioned IDPA match. We're all shooting the Burt Schaefer Memorial match at Onalani Rod and Gun Club next week, and since this isn't your typical IDPA match, there's a little bit more on the line here, seeing as this is sort of a tier 2 match, if you will, or a second level match. Because it's more than a club match, I think everyone in attendance will be a little bit more competitive than usual, and I'm really interested to see how this plays out with 3 different shooters, 2 of which are going to be juniors, all shooting, I think they're all shooting stock service pistol. They're in different classes, so it should be kind of interesting to see how this plays out. I also have no idea how I'm going to be able to record this and do well at the same time. I know everyone in my squad, and it's not a really big squad, and what happens when I do recordings of everyone in my squad, or a variety of people in my squad, and it's a small squad, I don't pay enough attention to what's going on the stage, and I tend to do kind of poorly. So I want to keep the recording to a minimum, but at the same time I need to record as much as possible. So it's going to be a delicate balance in terms of doing well personally and recording everything that I need to for the podcast. So it's going to be interesting. I'm really excited to see how this all pans out. And after that, I think we'll be talking with or we'll be featuring Sean Roberts, who is a local, mostly production division shooter, but I think he's been shooting a lot of revolver as well. He's B class, and I'm not quite sure how his schedule is going to work out, but I'm really eager to see him, walk through the stuff as well, especially if he's shooting production division, because that's right up my alley. Same class, same division, and he's been shooting long enough and shot enough major matches that I feel like I could learn an awful lot from him. Not that I can't learn anything from the Angry Pig shooting team with IDPA, but since I'm primarily a USPSA shooter, I'm extra anxious to, or I'm extra excited to see how that is going to work later on down the line. So with all of that rambling out of the way, let's get started with the news. First up in the news, we have some information that comes from Cron.com, which looks like a Houston-based newspaper, and it goes on to talk about 2 Houston schools canceling NRA gun safety classes. And it goes on to say, an elementary school and preschool in Houston ISD have canceled gun safety presentations for their young students over concerns that the National Rifle Association crafted the lessons. A spokesman for the Houston Independent School District said Tuesday that principals of Peck Elementary and the Martin Luther King Early Childhood Center do not know the NRA was behind the program, or did not know the NRA was behind the program. The principals made a decision that they did not want to participate in an event that folks could perceive as them taking a position one way or another on the gun control debate, or any other debate the NRA is involved in, HISD spokesman Jason Spencer said. The NRA sent out a news release touting its safety presentation at the 2 schools, which were scheduled for Tuesday and Wednesday, in advance of the gun group's annual meeting in Houston. NRA officials did not respond to comment about HISD's last-minute cancellations. Eddie the Eagle. The group's release said nearly 3 million school children in Texas have heard the gun safety presentation over the last 25 years. The program, according to the NRA, typically involves the Eddie the Eagle mascot in costume, delivering their message to kids who may come across guns. Stop, don't touch, leave the area, tell an adult. The NRA has been in the spotlight in recent months as U.S. lawmakers debate gun control measures, which so far have been defeated, following the December shooting at a Connecticut elementary school that left 20 students and 6 employees dead. HISD's Spencer said the principals of Peck and MLK knew only that Metropolitan Transit Authority's police department was involved in the gun safety lessons. Before canceling the presentation, the principal of Peck, Carlotta Brown, gave a radio interview on Tuesday morning saying that she was so elated to have gun safety program at our schools. We have to make sure that all of our children are safe, our adults are safe, and it starts in the elementary school, Brown told KTRH, according to the broadcast on its website. Brown did not mention the NRA in her comments, but the radio host noted that the association was behind the program and that the NRA representative was also interviewed. Spencer said Brown did not make the connection that it was an NRA-driven event until later when a news reporter asked to attend the presentation. Metro Police Chief Victor Rodriguez said in a statement that he was aware that the NRA's gun safety curriculum would be used in the schools, but said his officers were going to give the presentations. I am supportive of gun safety and programs that make the community safe by educating our youth. Metro works with several HISD schools along with Rail Line. A Metro officer who has done work at Peck and has a child at MLK reached out to schools about the gun safety presentation, according to HISD. Gail Fallon, the president of the Houston Federation of Teachers Union, said she understood the principal's concern given the recent controversy around the NRA. A lot of students live in homes where guns are present, so a safety class in of itself is not a bad idea, said Fallon, a gun owner herself. As with anything that is political, any presentation should meet the standard of information but not be persuasive. HISD's own police department gives general safety presentations to students and covers gun safety, Spencer said. To be honest, it would probably be beneficial if I had any background on the Eddie the Eagle program. I've never seen it. I've never seen the program in action. I really don't know a whole lot about it other than it's a gun safety program, and I really agree with the basic message. And, you know, I'm going to make a lot of assumptions here, but because this is my podcast, I'm allowed to do that. And I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that any child taking the Eddie the Eagle program or being in attendance for the Eddie the Eagle program is not being indoctrinated, and they are not magically going to become gun-touting conservatives. You know, I really don't think there's the political sway here that's going to indoctrinate children and make them suddenly want to run out and become gun-owning adults later on in life. I think the message is very neutral in the sense that your belief in politics really doesn't matter. The NRA is producing a program that seems to do very well I've heard lots of good things about it. I've just never actually been to one. And it's a real shame that the school has decided to pull the plug on the program just because of who is involved. You know, the teacher goes on to say, or the principal goes on to say that, you know, there are a lot of guns in Texas, and it's really important that we start the education early in elementary school so that, you know, accidents don't happen in the event that children, you know, accidentally come upon a gun or find themselves in a situation where, you know, there is a gun present. And the NRA's program, the Eddie the Eagle program, does a great job of educating children on how to handle those types of situations. And to take that away, you know, to take that potential learning experience away just because the National Rifle Association is involved with teaching it, it's kind of depressing. It's sad. And what makes matters worse is it seems as though the local police department was going to put on this program, and in doing so, they would be the ones teaching the program. So it's the NRA's curriculum, but it's being taught by the local police department. So I think in this case, either we're being overly politically correct, or, you know, there's a motive behind it, and, you know, maybe the school just has an anti-stance and doesn't want to be involved in anything the NRA has done, which, again, seems a bit odd considering the police would be delivering the curriculum. So the NRA really isn't even directly involved. So it's sad. It would have been nice to see the schools continue to be as eager to produce this program as they were initially, and look past the fact that the NRA created the curriculum. I mean, obviously, wouldn't you be reviewing anything you'd be teaching your children anyway? So was it biased? Was it going to turn them into, you know, old white conservatives clinging to guns and religion later on in life? I mean, it's I mean, it just seems a bit strange to pull the plug on a program that seems to be very beneficial to children, at least who the school administrators thought would be very beneficial before they found out who was involved in crafting the curriculum in itself. The next piece of news that I have for you is kind of interesting. I find it mildly amusing, and apparently it's become very controversial in the area where this billboard was posted. But before I start talking about the subject matter here, think about this first. If I were to say to you, turn in your arms, the government will take care of you, without giving you any context, what does that sound like to you? Does it sound like a solid message? Does it seem a bit strange? I mean, could you tell that there is sarcasm involved? Is it a warning? Am I pleading with you to turn in your guns because guns are dangerous? Well, that's what apparently a group of individuals think should happen with this message that has an image behind it to give it context. And the image we'll show you right now, either in that corner or that corner, or maybe I'll even make it big and put myself little in another corner. But this image here is controversial, so let's talk about it. ProGun Billboard featuring Native Americans draws ire, and this comes from CNN US. And it goes on to say, a pro-gun billboard that features images of Native Americans is drawing both contempt and support in Colorado. Turn in your arms. The government will take care of you, the sign says. While the sarcasm is evident, it's not without the image. The group behind the message is not. Lamar Advertising, the company that owns the billboard, told CNN affiliate KUSA that the group who paid for the message wants to remain anonymous. Regardless, the billboard has outraged some residents in Gailey, about 50 miles north of Denver. I think it is insensitive, because even though it is what may have happened in the past, people are still living that. Relatives are still living that. Kerry Salazar, a Greeley resident and Native American, told KUSA. I personally do not own a gun. I don't feel the need to, but for those that do, that is their right, Salazar said. My hope is that they can just take the picture down and leave the saying, believe me, I get it. So we'll take the picture away and it'll totally make sense. You know, people will get the message without the content, or without the context. But anyway, Dudley Brown, executive director of Rocky Mountain Gun Owners, told CNN he supported the billboard. "Where can we send a check for more support?" he asked. Some say the billboard makes light of the cruelties the federal government inflicted on Native Americans. Maureen Brucker told Greenlee Tribune the billboard reminded her of the horrors of the Wounded Knee Massacre on the Pine Ridge Reservation in 1890. According to historical reports, a few hundred Sioux left their reservation to visit a dying chief. The Sioux surrendered quietly to the troops, who disarmed almost all of them. A scuffle broke out over one man's rifle. A shot rang out from the group of struggling men, and soldiers with machine guns fired into the Native Americans, who were armed only with clubs and knives. An estimated 150 to 200 Native Americans were killed, including dozens of women and children, some miles away from the camp. A few dozen soldiers were reportedly killed. Brucker told the Tribune she thinks those behind the billboard should talk about their views openly. "I thought it was pretty cowardly that someone would put something like that up and spend the money for a billboard, but didn't have the courage to put their name on it," she said. So it's kind of interesting, because I think it is a very powerful message. When you combine the message with the image, I think it is very, very powerful and very effective. When you take away the image in the name of being politically correct, you lose a lot. And I'm not quite sure I understand where the people are becoming upset from. Obviously, I've never been involved in any sort of massacre. I haven't had any family members that I know of involved in any massacre. Seeing this doesn't dwell up old images and give me nightmares and make me upset on previous memories. So so maybe I don't quite get it. But when we're going to strip away things that some people are going to deem offensive in the name of politically correctness, I think we're giving a lot away here. I don't think it would make any difference. It certainly wouldn't. Again, it wouldn't bother me any. But if the image were replaced with Jews during Nazi Germany, during the Holocaust, I don't know that it would bother me either. Maybe that strikes a tone with people, but I think it's a powerful message paired with a very truthful event. And I think more people need to be aware of this sort of thing, and being politically correct is really going to neuter the message, if you will, or for lack of a better term. Well, it's about time to get into the lighter fare of the podcast and discuss some featured content, which is basically just some cool stuff that I found across the web that I wanted to share with you. And the first piece of featured content is the Practical Pistol Show from Ben Stoeger. Now, if you are a competitive shooter, you're probably aware of the name Ben Stoeger. If you are a Production Division USPSA shooter, Ben Stoeger is probably a household name for you. He's won a variety of titles. He is kind of the top dog when it comes to US Production Division shooters. And the really nice thing about Ben Stoeger is that he's been producing a lot of content to better shooters. So he's allowing, he's sharing his information, and there's a community surrounding him, which is really good for sharing a wealth of knowledge. And in addition to the Duty Project forums, which he's involved in, he's also written a couple of books. There are 3 that I'm aware of. I own 3 of them. The first book that he came out with a couple of months back was a little on the short side, but the quality of information was really there. It was well worth the $10 or whatever it was I spent for the ebook. The second book is a dry fire guide, which breaks down dry fire drills into 15-minute segments so that anyone can find the time to do a little bit of dry fire practice and improve their abilities. Now, I've been saying for weeks that I want to formulate a dry fire plan for myself based on this book. I just haven't gotten around to it yet. I'm one of those people that like to have everything written down in front of me. What drills I'll be doing on which day and at what time. And I just haven't gotten around to sitting down and drafting up that schedule of sorts. But it's on the agenda of things to do. And there is a third book, which I haven't read yet. I've only read the introduction, and I'm really eager to get started with it. However, I didn't want to start reading it with a couple of other books in progress. I'm different topics. I'm trying to get some other books finished so that I can devote my full attention to what is inside this last book. I've heard really good things about it, and if it's anything like the other books, I expect it to be full of very good information as well. But the thing that I want to talk about most is this Practical Pistol Show, which is a pretty routine podcast. It comes out fairly quickly, and episodes run between 7 and 10 minutes in length, thereabouts. And the one thing that I find, it's kind of ironic that I say this, but I like that it's 7 to 10 minutes long. This is coming from a guy that, does a podcast that runs, 45 minutes long on average. But I like that it's in 7 to 10 minute bites. Because of my work schedule, I work from home one day, I go into the office another day, and I do this a couple of times a week. And on top of that, my commute is really short. I have about a 10 to 12 minute commute from my front door to, the office door at work. So it makes listening to an episode really easy. In the past, for instance, if I was listening to an episode of The Gun Dudes, which I enjoy, I found it really difficult to keep up because I'd listen for 10 minutes in the morning, and then 9 hours later I'd listen 10 minutes on my way home. Then I'd be working from home the following day, so I wouldn't listen to it in my car because I didn't want to lose track of what was going on. And it got kind of complicated keeping up with what was going on and fully digesting the show for what it was. So with Ben Stoger's podcast, I can listen to one episode on the way to work, and it just works out really well. And the topics are very diverse, and they're rich in content. It's not your average USPSA discussion. It's not, should I shoot minor or major in limited 10, or what gun should I be shooting in production division, or what does this rule say about doing this or that. The topics are a bit more diverse. They are I wouldn't consider this podcast ideal for beginner shooters. I think this is more geared towards people that have been shooting a little while and are well versed in what happens at matches and the problems that pop up, and you can only gain that experience by experience, or gain that knowledge by experience. So I really like what he does with the podcast. All of the questions that he answers are user submitted, and because the podcasts are flowing rather quickly, there's a lot of information there to digest. I tend to wait a couple of days and then download several episodes and then sort of listen to them back to back to back. So again, really good podcast. Head over to benstoger.com and check it out. Next up in featured content is When the Balloon Goes Up podcast. It is an interview with Joyce Wilson, the executive director of IDPA, over the upcoming rulebook change, or what was the upcoming rulebook change. I think this was recorded about 2 days before IDPA released the new rulebook for public comment, for the public comment period and the public review period. And around the time that I saw this particular podcast, I had already listened to the Shooting USA podcast with Joyce Wilson on, and I've seen things like this before, where there's something in the works, it's about to be released, and the people behind it do sort of the press train kind of a thing, and they tell each podcast the same thing. So when I started seeing Joyce Wilson make the rounds, that's kind of what I expected. Each podcast to have the same information with very little deviation. So I listened to the Shooting USA podcast. I heard a couple of good things about the new IDPA rulebook, but in the grand scheme of things, I really wasn't expecting her to release a lot of information. So I listened to the Shooting USA podcast. I make a post on the Walton PA Facebook page. There's a little bit of discussion that crops up, and Ron Larimer from When the Balloon Goes Up posted that there was more information in his podcast. So out of curiosity, I click through, and I see that the Shooting USA podcast was roughly 8 minutes long, and the When the Balloon Goes Up podcast was like 20-something minutes long. So I'm thinking, obviously, there must be a lot more information here. So I start listening, and sure enough, there is just a tremendous amount of information in Ron's podcast. It's not definitive answers, but there's a lot of curiosity that gets weaved around. So initially they start talking about the potential changes in the new rule book, and Joyce talks about the XD being moved from ESP to SSP, which was already talked about in the Shooting USA podcast, which again, I thought this was going to be the general teaser all the way around. I think she confirmed one or two other things, and then Ron hit her with a barrage of questions, just one after another, and her reactions to each one was very interesting. You know, it went from, you know, yes, that's been addressed in the rule book, to maybe you'll have to wait and see, to no, that has definitely not been addressed in the rule book. And he hit her with so many questions back to back to back that I was just waiting for her to say, okay, that's enough, you know, you're asking too much, we have to go now. But you know, she played along, she went through each and every one of Ron's questions, and everything was addressed, sort of. So going into the rulebook release 2 days later, I had a general idea of what I was looking for, you know, when the rulebook finally was available. You know, based on this podcast, I knew where to look, and it was interesting to see how many changes came about based on that interview, or how many things in that interview were actually addressed in the rulebook. And it's a good listen. If you've listened to a couple of the Joyce Wilson podcasts but haven't listened to this one, it is well worth taking the 20 minutes to digest all of this information. It is still relevant even though the rulebook has been released, because there's a bit of concern, maybe a little bit of animosity towards the new rulebook, and this podcast will kind of give you a little background into maybe what's happening. So it's well worth the listen, even if the new rulebook has been released. So head over to When the Balloon Goes Up, balloongoesup.com, and click on the podcast link and listen to IDPA's Joyce Wilson talk about the recent IDPA rulebook change. The cigar recommendation for the week is the 601 Blue Label. It's actually the 601 Maduro, but the entire 601 line has developed secondary names by the color of the bands, and people seem it seems a little easier to keep track of the cigars that way. You know, you've got the blue label, which is the Maduro. You've got the green label, which is the Oscuro. The black label used to be the Connecticut, but it's been discontinued. And the red label is the Habano. And I think there may even be one more mixed in there, but that's neither here nor there. The cigar comes with a little bit of an interesting history. Now, several years ago, two friends get together. It's Eddie Ortega and Eric Espinosa, and they form EO Brands, which is Espinosa and Ortega. They formulate this company, they start producing cigars, and distribution begins to spread. The 601 brand pops up, and it's getting on people's radar. You know, people are enjoying it. You know, the brand is growing, other cigars are introduced, and the portfolio is expanded. After several years go by, Eddie Ortega and Eric Espinosa decide that they need bigger distribution, and they partner up with Rocky Patel. Rocky Patel is a huge name in the cigar industry, and so much of the company was sold to Rocky. Now, when Rocky comes in, he changes the branding, or not so much the branding, but he changes the packaging a little bit. The blends, we're told, never changed. The price point comes down on several of the cigars, and you know, there's this big push where, you know, consumers feel as though that the brand's going to be more accessible. It may look a bit uglier now, or it may look a bit ugly now, but you know, with the price point coming down and the availability going up, you know, these cigars should be everywhere, and you know, everyone will be happy. Well, I actually began to see less of them in my local cigar shops because, you know, for whatever reason, it just wasn't part of the Rocky Patel order that my locals were placing. So the availability actually dropped off for me. Some time goes by, and Eddie Ortega decides that he wants to do his own thing. So I would assume he sells his portion of the company and goes off, and he starts Ortega Cigars. Eric Espinosa and Rocky Patel are still together producing cigars, and eventually Eric Espinosa decides that he wants to branch off and do his own thing. So he purchases all of his brands back from Rocky Patel, and he opens up a factory in Nicaragua, I believe, which is La Zona. So he begins producing brands in the La Zona factory, and he continues distribution of his older stuff, the 601 stuff, which now is exclusively Eric Espinosa's product. So there's been kind of an evolution throughout the cigar's life, and I found it kind of interesting to see how two friends come together, they go into business to one another, they bring in a third partner to expand distribution, they separate again, and then all of the lines that were initially brought out by the two of them now belong to one of them after all of this, you know, stuff has gone down. Kind of interesting, not really relevant if you're looking for, you know, some information on the cigar, but I'm pretty sure these are Nicaraguan made. They're made by Don Pepin Garcia, which is also a big name in the cigar industry. It's made by My Father Cigars. They're Maduro wrapper, obviously, since it's Maduro. And they're probably medium, maybe medium to full. Nothing I would consider overwhelming. They pair very well with coffee. They're a bit heavy for in the morning, but you know, maybe middle of the afternoon, late evening kind of a thing. They go really well, especially if you enjoy coffee in the evening like I do. They make a really good pairing, except for in this case where I have this vile Folgers gourmet coffee which tastes atrocious, but I don't want to go out and get more coffee. So there's your cigar recommendation of the week. I think they run maybe $5 or $6. This is the Robusto size. They're kind of square pressed. They come in a variety of sizes, a variety of wrappers. If Maduro is not your thing, there are other options. If you're interested in trying the 601 brand, I would suggest contacting my retailer of choice, which is Buckhead Cigar in Atlanta, Georgia. His phone number is, let's see if I can remember it, 404-844-0400. Mike is also on Twitter and Facebook as Buckhead Cigar. I think he's also on Google Plus as well. And reach out, get in touch with Mike, tell him that you want some cigars. He'll pack them up, we'll ship them to you, you know, easy peasy. And in addition to supporting my favorite cigar retailer, you'll also be supporting a big gun guy as well. Mike is, I believe, an NRA Life member, and he owns several guns which you can find pictures of occasionally on Twitter when he hits the range. Well, we're coming down the home stretch, and it's about time to get into a featured discussion topic. Now, originally I was going to talk a little bit about the new IDPA rulebook. However, I've decided to change that on the fly. I think we're getting a little too involved with competitive shooting in the general podcast. When we do the episode on competitive shooting, we can talk all we want about the IDPA rulebook, but for the time being, I want to keep at least one episode a month very general firearm specific. And in order to do that, I wanted to talk a little bit about the ammo crunch that we're in right now. Just prior to the new year, I started loading up on ammunition. Custom Gun Finishes, which is a sponsor for me through or for USPSA matches, was kind enough to provide me 2,000 rounds of factory ammunition. It's 115 grain Federal. It's same stuff you find, well, same stuff that you used to be able to find pretty much anywhere, but you know, boxes of 50 available in bulk from a variety of the online sites, which has since dried up. So, you know, going into the USPSA season, I felt pretty good about being able to shoot for a good long time. And because I was mixing in IDPA matches throughout the year, I wanted to have some additional ammunition to shoot at those matches. So, you know, I started keeping an eye out at Walmart. Everything was drying up. Really weren't finding anything. And then out of the blue, I get a text message from a friend of mine at, I don't know, in the middle of the night on New Year's Eve. He got stuck working, and he was working at Walmart. Apparently, 1,000 rounds of the same 115 grain Federal came in the shipping department and was locked up in the back. So I got this this late night message that there was ammunition available. If I was going to get there and buy it, I needed to get there as soon as possible. So I woke up for whatever reason around 4 something on New Year's Day. I'm not, you know, a party animal like I used to be. I think I was asleep by 10, and so I get the message, and I wound up at Walmart at like 5:45 in the morning, waiting for them to open up the doors on the holiday. So I get inside. We go. This friend of mine goes in the back. He gets the ammunition for me. I was able to buy 1,000 rounds. And since I purchased those 1,000 rounds, I have not seen anything at the local Walmarts. Every time I go over for something, I make a quick pass by the ammo case, and it's just been empty. Nothing is available. At one point in time, 40 was kind of common. You know, I was seeing a fair amount of it, but I haven't seen any 40. 45 seems to be non-existent, and 9mm seems to be one of the toughest calibers to come by. I think the toughest of all might be 22 long rifle. I just haven't seen any of it since January. So as of right now, I had roughly 3,000 rounds of ammunition, and that was going to get me through part of the summer, so that I could shoot 2 matches a month USPSA, 1 match a month IDPA, and I felt pretty confident that I'd be able to get pretty far on what I had, shooting roughly 150 rounds per match USPSA, and roughly anywhere from 100 to 120 rounds IDPA. So I was feeling pretty good. However, I seem to be going through this ammunition a little bit faster than I thought, and I thought for sure that 5-6 months into the new year we would start to see the ammunition supply come up and see it more readily available, but I haven't. So I'm a bit concerned. I have all the components that I need for reloading. I talked a little while ago about selling my Lee progressive press and getting a Dillon, and I was going to do that, except for Dillon was back ordered 6 months, and I wasn't able to get a hold of a Dillon press. Since then, financial situation has changed, and a Dillon press is kind of out of the question at the moment. Even if one were available, I just couldn't put down the money to buy one. So I'm going to be reloading sooner than expected. I wanted to already be reloading by now, but I had hoped to upgrade to a Dillon before I even unboxed the Lee, which really hasn't happened. I'm starting to see more and more reloading components become available. Everyone that's shooting matches is picking up brass. That's becoming a real problem. I'm seeing more and more often people not helping with pasting and resetting stages, and instead picking up brass. It's kind of annoying. But it is what it is. I'm not in charge, and it's not my place to say, hey, you're supposed to be pasting and not picking up brass. So I'm picking up brass at the end of the match when possible, and I've got I think it's something like 2,700 rounds I have tumbled. I have probably another 600 that need to be cleaned yet, and then I'll be ready to go. I have a pound of powder that seems to be popping up a little more often. I'm following more local businesses on Facebook, and one of the nice things that they're doing is posting updates on inventory. So when they get a shipment of powder, it's going up on Facebook, and if I need to, I could run out and pick up a pound of powder, and it works out really well that way. I don't really have a preferred bullet retailer or a bullet manufacturer. I haven't reloaded anything, so I'm not tied into a particular brand. I don't have any brand loyalty at this point. But I have purchased 1,000 rounds from Black Bullet International, and it looks like they're struggling to keep up, but they are continually producing product. So again, we're seeing bullets become available. We're seeing powder become available. Primers are still seem to be a little tough to come by in this area, but again, I'm seeing them pop up from time to time, so it's not impossible to get them. Things seem to be easing on the reloading front, but for factory ammunition, it doesn't seem to have gotten any better. So what's really the hold up here with getting into reloading? Initially it was I wanted to upgrade presses because I'm hearing horror stories about the one I have, but right now it's a giant refrigerator that's sitting kind of right outside this door, and I would guess that in the 1950s this was the Cadillac of refrigerators. It's kind of elaborate for what it is. It's big, it's heavy, and it's really, really heavy. It was in the house when we bought it, and immediately my wife and I said, this isn't going to work, and we went out, we bought a new refrigerator, and we paid the delivery guys a couple of bucks to move it from our first floor into our basement. I was going to use it for a beer fridge, and it didn't work out great for a beer fridge because I had this giant pedestal in the middle of it with these Lazy Susans, and once you take all that stuff out, you really can't get a whole lot of beer in there. You can't get 2 cases side by side. It's more like a case and a couple of bottles, so it's not real it's not real wide, and it's not real deep either. I thought maybe I'll put a half barrel in there. Well, half barrel is way too big for that. I would have had to have gone to a quarter barrel, and I wasn't drinking enough beer to make the leap into getting a keg set up. So the refrigerator wound up housing bottles, and after, I don't know, maybe a year and a half of using it, I just unplugged it. I wasn't buying enough beer, wasn't drinking enough beer to make use of it, and I saw my electric bill drop dramatically. So, you know, this old ancient refrigerator, while it works great, is an energy hog, and it's so big and heavy that I just can't move it by myself, and I don't have a pickup truck. So one of these days I need to get a couple of people up here to give me a hand truck or an appliance truck, and at least a pickup truck, so that we can haul this thing away and I can make space for my up and coming reloading table. And I'm really excited to get that done, but it just, the scheduling just hasn't worked out to get this thing moved. So one of these days I'll get rid of it, I'll start reloading it. I'm pressing some friends. My brother has a big pickup, or a full-size pickup, and I'm trying to work something out so that we can get rid of this thing and I can get reloading, because I'm starting to worry now. I still have probably 2,200 rounds, 2,100 rounds left, factory ammunition, but I want to get through the whole setup and testing phase, so that when I do start using reloaded components or reloaded ammunition, I'm comfortable with it. It's all set up, and there's not a time crunch in where I'm moving into panic mode to get these rounds made so that I can start using them. So no real, unfortunately, not a whole lot has changed since the last time I talked about reloading a couple of months ago, but you know, it's definitely getting to me. I need to get this thing started. I need to make the space. I need to build the bench, you know, get all set up and start cranking out rounds so that I can continue to shoot. Because if things keep up the way they are, once I run out of factory ammunition, I don't know that I'll be able to get any more. In the last 5 to 6 months, I expected to see things slowly settle out, but it just doesn't seem to have happened, at least not in this area. So unless either the market starts settling out, or reloading factory ammunition becomes available again, I don't know. I think I might run out of ammunition and need to start rationing where I shoot. And if I have to start rationing things, it'll probably be cutting IDPA, since it's, you know, what I do. You know, I'm a USPSA shooter first and IDPA shooter second. So worst case scenario, I've got to cut IDPA so that I can continue shooting USPSA, and I really don't want to have to do that, but it doesn't look like the market's going to make things any better for me. So I don't know, wish me luck, and once I get this massive refrigerator moved and out of here, hopefully you'll see me reloading and we can talk about that in future episodes. Well, it's about time for me to get out of here, and I want to thank you for checking out episode 60 of Shooting the Breeze, the formal gun podcast of WaltInPA.com. All of the support over the past year and a half or so has been fantastic. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to, you know, even more support and even more interaction as we go forward with this new podcast format. I'd love your opinion on what you think of my plans, you know, based on what you've heard in the update and this podcast, what my plans are for the future episodes with featured shooters. If there's anything you'd like to see or hear featured on the podcast, I would greatly appreciate it. If you come across any interesting news or featured content stuff, please feel free to send it my way, and I'll be happy to include it in future episodes. So before I get out of here, I would strongly suggest that you head over to the Gun Rights Radio Network and check out a variety of pro-gun podcasts offered up by a variety of really good people. So again, thanks for watching, thanks for downloading, listening, subscribing, you know, all the stuff that goes along with the social media front and sharing this information, and I will catch you next time.
You can now hear Gun Rights Radio Network while you're on the go with Stitcher Smart Radio. On-demand news, talk, and more on your mobile phone. The latest episode is always available for you. No syncing needed and no memory or storage wasted. Available for your iPhone, Android phones, or your BlackBerry. Downloading is easy. Go to Stitcher.com or check out your app store. Stitcher Smart Radio, the smarter way to listen to radio. Gun Rights Radio Network shows can be found under Sources.